for the Diamond Jubilee?
I don't know yet. There's lots of things with security issues and everything else.
Duke and Duchess of Sussex are excited and honoured to attend the Queen's Platinum Jubilee celebration.
Crowds have gathered in London to watch the Platinum Party at the Palace as part of the Jubilee celebration.
Harry and Meghan, hand in hand, this was the couple's first official public appearance in the UK.
Harry caught lying again in court. Look, we're going to examine the evidence because, of course, the situation...
In honour of the Queen, Prince Harry and Meghan making their first official appearance in the UK.
That, you know, the amazing efforts of these men and women are kind of being used as a pawn.
Prince Harry, what's been the reaction to him and his wife?
A portion of the crowd that booed quite loudly. They were then really overtaken by a portion of the crowd cheering.
See the children with the Queen. I think that's the photograph, that's the image that everybody wants to see.
Everyone is hoping we get to see a picture of the Queen with little Lilibet, meeting her for the first time.
I'm just imagining.
The last time Harry and Meghan took part in something similar was in 2019.
Personal decision to only have working members of the royal family with her.
This is unprecedented. We've never had a monarch celebrate a Platinum Jubilee. I don't know.
Service has been absolutely unwavering.
It has, and I have big question marks over how much of a profile the Sussexes are going to have. Are we going to see...
Prince Harry is furious, quote unquote, following the 4-day celebration with claims that he...
I mean, he was completely ignored, and certainly, you know, from when I saw it. I mean, there was some pictures of the...
It was a royal reunion for Harry and Meghan, their first official appearance in 2 years. Nine's ill.
By the spring of 2022, the Queen had made up her mind about something, and very few people outside her closest circle knew what it was. Rebecca English of the Daily Mail had been picking up signals from inside the palace for weeks, and what she eventually reported revealed a side of Elizabeth II that the public rarely saw. Before Prince Harry and Meghan Markle set foot on British soil for the Platinum Jubilee, the Queen had already laid down a private demand to her family. It wasn't loud, it wasn't issued through formal channels, but every senior royal understood it, and the moment Harry's return was confirmed, that demand became the invisible rule shaping the entire 4-day celebration. This is the story of what the Queen wanted, and what she got instead. If you want more deep dives like this, make sure to subscribe to Royal Archives. To understand the weight of that private demand, you have to understand where the Queen stood in early 2022. She was 96 years old. She had buried her husband less than a year before. Her mobility was failing, her public appearances were shrinking, and the family she had spent 70 years holding together was fracturing in real time. The Sussexes had given the Oprah interview just 14 months earlier. Harry's accusations against the institution were still echoing across the British press. William wasn't speaking to his brother. Charles was, by most accounts, exhausted by the entire situation. And then there was the Jubilee itself. 70 years on the throne, a milestone no British monarch had ever reached. The Queen knew, and her closest aides knew she knew, that this might be the last great public moment of her reign. She had already withdrawn from much of the planning. Catherine and William were being prepared to lead the celebrations. The balcony lineup had been quietly restricted to working royals only, which meant Harry and Meghan would be visible, but kept at the edge of the frame. Every detail had been calculated. But the family question, what to do about Harry, was the one detail no one had solved. The planning meetings inside Buckingham Palace through April and May of that year had reportedly grown tense. The Queen's senior aides were split. One faction wanted Harry and Meghan excluded entirely from any official function, arguing that the optics of their attendance would distract from the 70-year milestone. Another faction, closer to the Queen herself, pushed for inclusion, not as a political gesture, but as a personal one. The Queen had not seen Harry in person since the unveiling of the Diana statue almost a year earlier. She had never seen Lilibet at all. For a woman approaching the end of her 9th decade, those facts carried weight that no aide could override. That's where Rebecca English's reporting from the Daily Mail became important. According to her source inside the palace, the Queen had issued a private wish to her family in the weeks leading up to the Jubilee. She wanted the 4 days to be an occasion in which the country, including her own family, comes together. No confrontations, no public coldness, no briefings against the Sussexes from rival camps, and above all, nothing that would overshadow the 70-year milestone she had earned. In palace terms, that wasn't a suggestion, it was a directive. What made the demand unusual was who it was aimed at. The Queen wasn't worried about Harry and Meghan causing a scene. She was worried about everyone else. Charles, William, Camilla, the wider Cambridge circle, the aides who had spent 2 years briefing against the Sussexes. She knew her own family well enough to know that if anyone was going to puncture the celebration, it wouldn't be the couple flying in from California. It would be the ones already in London. And so she gave her order: behave, hold the line, let the country see a family, even a broken one, standing together for 4 days. Those who worked closely with the Queen in that period described her mood as quietly resolved. She was not angry. She was not, by any account, lecturing her family. She was simply drawing a line and expecting them to respect it. Staff who attended her in those final months have since described how her demands grew shorter and clearer as her energy faded. She no longer had time for prolonged negotiation. When she wanted something, she said it once, and she expected it to be done. What happened next is where the story turns. Harry and Meghan arrived in Britain on Wednesday, June 1st. They brought Archie, then 3 years old, and Lilibet, who was about to turn 1. It was Lilibet's first visit to the country. It was also the first time the Queen would meet the great-granddaughter who had been named after her. A name that had caused its own controversy just a year earlier, when palace sources briefed the BBC that the Queen had not been asked for permission before the name was used. The private meeting was set for Thursday, June 2nd, at Windsor. The Queen had already missed the Trooping the Colour balcony appearance by then, having experienced what the palace called discomfort during the parade. But she was determined to see the children. Aides at Buckingham Palace later described the meeting as formal. It lasted 15 minutes. 15 minutes. That number, when it leaked, told its own story. Because anyone who had ever seen the Queen with her great-grandchildren knew that 15 minutes was not how she normally operated. With George, Charlotte, and Louis, visits stretched for hours. With Archie, back in 2019, the Queen had cleared an afternoon. But for Lilibet, the namesake, the child born in California, the daughter of the son who had walked away, the meeting was kept short and contained. The official line was that the Queen's health required it. Possibly true, but Rebecca English's earlier reporting suggested a second layer. The Queen had demanded that the Jubilee weekend not be hijacked by Sussex drama. A long, photographed, emotional reunion at Windsor would have done exactly that. 15 minutes, warm but bounded, sent a different message. The Queen had seen her great-granddaughter. The family box had been ticked. The celebration could continue without becoming a story about Harry. According to royal biographer Robert Hardman, who later spoke to friends of the Queen for his book on her life, the monarch was genuinely thrilled to meet Lilibet, who reportedly crawled around the floor at her feet. That detail rings true. The warmth was real, but the constraint around it, the formality, the brief window, the absence of any official photograph released to the public, was the Queen's demand made visible. No professional photographer was present. No portrait was commissioned. The only image of Lilibet from that trip that the public would ever see was a private snapshot taken by photographer Meghan Harriman at her birthday party 2 days later. The Queen, the namesake, the woman whose own childhood nickname had given the child her name, was not in that picture. That absence, more than anything else, told the story of how carefully the meeting had been managed. And then came Friday. The national service of Thanksgiving at St. Paul's Cathedral was the moment the country had been waiting for, the senior royals arriving in sequence, the bells, the hymns, the cameras trained on every face. Harry and Meghan were there. They were given seats, but not at the front. They were placed across the aisle from William and Kate, close enough to be seen on the same shot, far enough that no conversation could pass between them. And the Queen herself? She didn't come. The palace cited her ongoing discomfort. That was accepted publicly. But behind closed doors, her absence carried another meaning. The Queen had asked her family to come together. She had not promised to be in the room when they did. By staying at Windsor, she ensured the spotlight fell on the unity she had demanded, and not on any reunion she might have been forced to choreograph between her grandsons. What happened inside St. Paul's that morning has since been reported in detail. According to Yahoo's royal coverage at the time, Harry and Meghan did not exchange a single word with William and Kate across the entire 4-day weekend, not at the Cathedral, not at any of the events that followed. The two couples arrived separately, sat separately, and left separately. Whatever the Queen had demanded of her family, the Cambridges had drawn a line of their own, and here is where the deeper layer of the story begins to surface. The Queen's private wish that the family hold together for the country was already being quietly broken before Harry's plane had even landed. Sources inside the palace had been briefing the British press against Meghan for weeks. The decision to keep the Sussexes off the balcony had been positioned as a logistical matter, but the message it sent was unmistakable. Every camera angle, every seating chart, every guest list had been calibrated to minimize the Sussexes' visibility while maintaining the appearance of family unity. That was the contradiction at the heart of the Jubilee. The Queen wanted unity. Her staff and her senior family members wanted distance, and the weekend was structured to deliver both: unity for the cameras, distance behind the scenes. The result was a celebration that looked, on television, like a family rallying around its matriarch. But to anyone watching closely, to anyone reading the body language, the seating choices, the absence of any joint photograph between the brothers, the truth was the opposite. The Queen had asked for one thing. She had been given the surface of it. Across British media that weekend, royal commentators began to notice. Some online discussions pointed to the seating at St. Paul's as deliberate. Others questioned why no official statement had been released about the Queen's private meeting with Lilibet. And quietly, across social media, one observation kept surfacing: that the family the cameras were showing was not the family that actually existed anymore. The Queen had demanded unity. The country was being shown its reflection. Saturday brought Lilibet's first birthday. The Sussexes celebrated privately at Frogmore Cottage, where they were staying for the duration of the visit. Reports at the time suggested the Queen had hoped to attend. She did not. By then, her energy was visibly depleted, and the palace was actively managing what little public schedule she still had left. Charles, however, did visit. A royal source described his meeting with Lilibet as very emotional. He had not seen his grandson Archie in nearly 2 years. He had never met his granddaughter at all. That moment, Charles holding the namesake of his mother for the first time, just months before that mother would die, is one of the small, quiet scenes the Jubilee story rarely revolves around. But it was real, and it was a piece of the family unity the Queen had asked for, not the version her staff had engineered, the genuine version. By Sunday, June 5th, the Sussexes were on a plane back to California. They had been in Britain for less than 5 days. They had attended one public service. They had met the Queen for 15 minutes. They had not spoken to William and Kate. They had introduced their daughter to her great-grandmother for the first and what would turn out to be the only time. And whatever private words the Queen had exchanged with Harry during that Windsor meeting, words no one outside that room has ever fully reported, were the last she would ever speak to him in person. 3 months later, she was gone. When you look back at the Platinum Jubilee through that lens, the Queen's private demand takes on a different weight. She had not asked her family to perform unity for the cameras. She had asked them to actually be a family for 4 days, to set aside the briefings, the resentments, the cold silences, to give the country and her a moment of genuine togetherness before whatever came next. What she received instead was a carefully staged version of it, a St. Paul's service where her grandsons sat across an aisle, a balcony she had carved her own son and grandson out of, a 15-minute private meeting that doubled as a goodbye no one knew was a goodbye. The Queen's demand had been heard. It had not been honored, and in the months that followed her death, as the family fractured further? As Spare was published, as the Oprah interview echoed back into the news cycle, as Harry and William drifted into open estrangement, palace insiders began to reflect on those 4 days in June. The Jubilee had been the last real chance, the last moment when the Queen's authority alone might have been enough to hold everyone in the same room. Without her, that authority was gone, and the family she had spent 70 years protecting began to come apart in ways she had spent her final months trying to prevent. Some of those insiders, speaking quietly to royal correspondents in the years since, have described a sense of regret, not over how the public events were staged. Those had gone smoothly enough. The regret was over the smaller things. The brevity of the Windsor meeting, the absence of a single photograph of the Queen with her namesake. The decision, somewhere in the chain of palace command, to treat Lilibet's introduction as a logistical task rather than a family moment. None of those choices had been made by the Queen herself, but all of them had happened in her name. Rebecca English's quiet pre-Jubilee report that the Queen wanted her family to come together with no drama overshadowing the celebration has aged into something heavier than it seemed at the time. Read now, it sounds less like a wish and more like a warning. The Queen had seen what was coming. She had asked her family to delay it, just for 4 days. And even that, in the end, was more than they could give her. What stays with you, looking back at those 4 days, isn't the pageantry or the flypasts or the carriages. It's the 15 minutes in a room at Windsor. A great-grandmother, a great-granddaughter crawling at her feet. A son she would not see again. A demand that had already been quietly broken before any of them arrived. The Queen had asked her family for 1 weekend. She got the version of it her staff was willing to give her. If this story stayed with you, there's more we haven't told yet about what the Queen said to Harry in that final private meeting at Windsor, about why Charles was the one who made the emotional gesture that weekend instead of William, and about the conversations inside the palace in the weeks after the Jubilee, when the staff began to realize what they had quietly cost her. Subscribe to Royal Archives and we'll keep walking through these private moments together, the ones that mattered then and matter even more now.